Sandra all the time is here with the cold hard truth. She's the ears and the eyes for me and you. Every day, everyone want to hear from Sandra. And every time on the air, she's getting better. So tell your sister, tell your brother, tell your mama, call Sandra in the morning and in the evening. They always calling Sandra. And when they start fighting, they calling Sandra. And
That's right, folks. Everyone is telling their mama about the cold hard truth. Welcome to another episode with more truth-telling, more problem-solving, and of course, more tea spilling than ever before. Sit back, students, grab your tea and turn up the volume because class is now in session. Call in at 936-2626 because your voice matters. Share your opinion on issues that matter the most to you. Good morning, Cayman. How is everybody doing this beautiful Friday morning? Happy Friday. Hope you guys are doing well. Everybody's good. Welcome. We got a special show for you today. Absolutely fabulous show, in fact. You know how this might have happened to you before. You get up in the morning, you're laser focused, you've accomplished a goal, things are going good. And then somebody sends you something that is so negative first thing in the morning that, they're trying to throw your spirit off. Have you ever had that happen to you? I'm sure you have. I am sure we've all been in that position. Well, that just happened to me this morning. And I'm not going to talk about it in terms of any details, because what I am going to do is I'll be contacting my legal team this morning. And we're going to be filing some papers here today, without a doubt. It is time. It is time, folks. I sit back and I take a lot, and I can tell you that this is something that I will not be taking, and it's going to be a warning shot to everyone out there, because 2025 is a no nonsense year for me. I'm trying to just have a chill year, despite the fact that it's an election year. I guess there's no such thing as a chill election cycle, but I'm chilled. I'm good. And I'm going to just do what I have to do. But you can believe that there are people who are not going to say anything that they want to say about me, because I will take legal action. And the time is now. I can tell you that what I just saw, I am shocked and flabbergasted at. And so I'm speaking to my usual lawyers. If they're not able to do it, don't worry. There's enough lawyers in Cayman that can certainly assist me. So if you're a lawyer and you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, what is Sandy talking about? I've got a high profile, slam dunk, winnable case for you. We ain't losing this. Trust and believe me. This one is in the bag, and you're gonna win it, and this person is gonna have to pay our cost. So please, please, please reach out if you have the relevant experience and you want to take a defamation case. Wow, have I got one for you? Enough is enough. I can tell you that here this morning. Enough is enough. There's only so much disrespect that I'm going to take from the likes of, I'm not even going to call his name this morning, but it's done. I am fit to be tied, but I'm going to maintain my composure. We have a very, very important guest coming on the program this morning, and I can tell you that no one is going to deter me from this conversation about the cruise port at the cruise berthing facility, because of course, that's exactly, my apologies, what they would want is for me to be somehow unnerved here today, but it ain't going to happen. We're going to deal with this in a legal manner, and he's not going to ruffle my feathers this morning. This is when you know, right? You got this. You're zen and you have this. But inside, I have to tell you all that I am most perturbed. I'll say it in as British a way as I can, because the British have a knack for saying things when they're pissed off that you go, are you really pissed off? My gosh, you sound so calm. I'm properly perturbed this morning. Yes, I am. I can't believe it. I'm fit to be tied. And you're like, are you really? Because you sound calm to me. Yes, honey child, I am fit to be tied this morning, but we're not going to let them have the joy here today. We have an important guest joining us at 8 o'clock, Miss Marla Dukharan. So we're going to just keep the cool, because we have been working on getting her on this program for far too long for anybody to throw off the vibe here today. But don't worry, honey chat. Auntie Sandy, don't take foolishness in 2025. This ain't going to be your year. I can assure you of that. I will deal with the situation. Don't worry. Hallelujah. Child, some days you just feel like you need some extra prayer. What people say, you need to armor up, because these fools want to think they can do and say anything, but they are next level crazy if they think that I'm going to sit back and do nothing about it. Good morning, caller.
Morning. I just want to apologize in advance to Miss Dukharan, because I know there's going to be people calling in. And
no, there's not going to be. There won't be. Won't be, because I'm going to get to that here in a second.
Well, I just want to apologize to her from now for all the past, because she's been getting comments on Facebook and all that. Like, this is not who we are, and we should be able to have proper discussion and dialogue without attacking one another and making threats. I don't know if you saw the comments last night that I made on the ACT post, where they tagged her, and then the conversation went on, and someone was like, oh, well, I wonder why she doesn't want to meet with Elio and have a debate with Elio. And I said, I wonder why. Perhaps because when he was on Cayman Mall Road and people tried to call in to get genuine questions answered, like myself, he was constantly cutting me off. being rude, being condescending, being disrespectful. So why would anyone who is a professional like Mr. Grant want to sit down and have a conversation with him?
Oh, gee, I wonder why. Thank you, my darling.
I wonder why.
All right. So we've got some ground rules here this morning. So I'm glad that that caller called in because let me say first and foremost that this is a very, very important discussion. I will do a formal introduction of Miss Marla here when she joins the show. And I want to make it very, very clear. Thank you so much. Someone just sent a message, said, good morning, Sandy. I'm praying for you. And yes, enough is enough. Thank you. Thank you so much for that message. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm a person with a lot of patience. Some of you have said to me, you don't know how I do it. You're like, oh my God. It's like you are, you know, Job some days with the amount of patience that you have. Well, I'll never admit to that because I don't think I'm the most patient person in the world, but anywho, I do put up with a lot and I ignore a lot. Even when I address issues, believe me when I tell you that the response that you guys see is not as much of a nuclear response as you think. I'm still keeping it relatively calm. But there's certain things that people and certain caliber people are definitely not going to be saying about me without action being taken. And that's where we are here today. But we're not going to focus on that because, like I said, we've got a very, very important guest coming on the program. And I want to set some ground rules for today's show. First of all, good morning to everyone in the class. I see we're strong at over 300 and 30 people already on our social media and countless more listening in on the radio. Happy Friday, everyone. What I will say is this conversation is obviously very, very divisive. Everyone is entitled to their opinion on this, but what you're not entitled to is your facts. We're inviting a very well-respected economist on the program this morning. She has paid her dues professionally to anyone in the world. You can't, the likes of Elio, I don't care who he thinks he is, or anybody else having this discourse, cannot stand up to this woman. And it is what it is. You can argue all you want, Elio, or anybody else, but this woman comes with facts and figures, and she is well respected. And so she has done a presentation on a number of different topics. This is her latest one that she did early this week on cruise tourism. And quite frankly, we're going to allow her the opportunity to talk about her findings today. We have some questions for her, and we are going to give her the respect that she deserves on this program. And what that means, for those of you who are listening to the program this morning, that means that we will not be taking any phone calls. Sorry for you. We will give her as much time as she needs to explain things properly. We do have a lot of questions, and I have devised 15 top questions myself around her report. And we can go through some of those questions. She can go through some of the highlights of her report. And that is how the program, folks, will go up until, I'm just printing off my questions here, up until 9:30 this morning. Hopefully she can stay with us the entire time. As I've indicated, I work too hard on this show sometimes, not sometimes, all the time. And I've worked too hard to get her on this program. So no one is going to derail that this morning. So we will not be taking any phone calls while she's here. If you have a question or comment, you can submit those via WhatsApp. You can certainly comment and chat with each other in the usual chat section. You know that those show up on the screen. I may or may not necessarily be reading all of those, because I'm sure they'll be coming in by the hundreds today. So the other thing you'll notice is yesterday we posted a message in the afternoon about the Chamber candidate forum that we will no longer be putting the comments on the screen, simply because someone actually reached out to the Chamber and complained that we are not, let me read to you what they said, because I was quite flabbergasted by the comment, because number one, it simply isn't true. And they don't even understand. It's so interesting how people don't understand what it is that they're saying or how social media works. And I know they don't, based on how they worded their complaint. And so, they still send in these nonsensical complaints, which make absolutely no sense. So what they sent in basically said to the Compass that, let me just pull it up on the screen here so you guys can see. And I appreciate, not the Compass, the Chamber. I appreciate the Chamber sharing this with me, because I was able to provide them with sufficient evidence to demonstrate that this complaint is ill-founded and it has no merit whatsoever. But it simply demonstrates how far people are willing to go this election cycle. And I don't know what it is about this election cycle. Well, someone said to me it's because CMR is actually educating the people. And maybe that's a first. We're here trying to educate the people on these very, very important topics. And so people are paying attention, people are listening. And so there is certainly that. And I guess certain people who want to retain power, who want to hold on to it, will do anything in their little greedy hands to ensure that the people are not well informed and that the people are not educated about what is happening in this country. And so, my remit is not to tell you what to do on April the 30th. My remit is simply to give you the information that you will need to make the best possible decision, hopefully, on April the 30th when you go to the polls. So that's the most important thing, right? So here we are, folks, talking about important issues. We see the forum, and someone reached out and complained that we were showing favoritism in the comment section, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the commentary, we're somehow playing with our poll, which we know other people are actually doing that. So let's take Newlands, for example. A few of you were shocked by the Newlands debate poll, and even the who would you vote poll. And I'll tell you exactly what is happening there. There's a particular party who does not have a candidate in Newlands. So by process of elimination, you guys are smart enough to figure that out. Progressives has a party member, and so does the TCCP. That only leaves the CINP. Okay, so let me not, let's get to the chase here this morning. I have good evidence to show that they are actually supporting Raul in this political race. And not only they're supporting Raul monetarily in this political race, and to be clear, there may be other parties that are doing so with independents, trying to, kind of hedge their bets because they know that within their party, they're not going to get sufficient votes to take the government. So they're talking to people outside of that. Okay. So what we have happening here, folks, is they are going and voting for him in the what would you call it? In the chamber forum questionnaire, like who won the debate question. It's up for Newlands, it's up for Red Bay from last night as well. So where they don't have a candidate, they are throwing off the numbers by voting for someone else and, allegedly also supporting him in other ways as well. Because those numbers don't reflect anywhere near what is going to be happening in the real election in the real world. So, you know how I said that my poll would be highly accurate within the 95% percentile? There will be those districts that I am watching very, very carefully. And I can see things on the back end. So there are things that I know that are happening. And so that's one that I can tell you that they are definitely playing with. Just like they played with the elimination poll once they saw that Carmen was coming in at like 2-3%, definitely under 10%. The first elimination question that we had, they went and started getting any and everybody to vote in that poll as well. The poll isn't a scientific poll. It's relying on people being honest, which obviously for some of you might be a tall order. So anyway, this complaint came up accusing CMR of, this is what it said: the debates have been very balanced so far in the part of the chamber, but we've received some concerning feedback regarding CMR's broadcast of the debates. I haven't seen it myself as I tune in on your YouTube page, but it appears that there are biases based on her election partners and advertisers. Positive posts about her clients are being highlighted, pinned to the stream, while only negative posts about their opponents are being highlighted. And so that's absolutely false. First of all, there's no such thing as pinning it to the screen. We're not pinning any comments. You can't pin comments. The format that I have here, I don't know what they mean by pin, but you can't pin comments. You show comments on the screen like you see now. Miss Darlene's comment that says, "Good morning, everyone," is on the screen. Then Miss Beulah's comment is on the screen. And what we do is we just go through, the moderators go through all of the comments and just put them up on the screen. Now, there may be some in a live show like today where you literally have 3, 4, 5, sometimes 600 comments per show. Not every single comment is going to show up on the screen. We don't have the time to filter 200, 300 comments during a 1 hour or 1.5 hour, what do you call it? Chamber forum. What I can also tell you that is very, very interesting is that this comment came in yesterday after the debate for Newlands. So again, I want you to keep in mind what I have just said to you about what is happening, in my opinion, with the Newlands numbers. Okay? Keep that in mind and then listen to this foolishness. And you see, the one thing with Auntie is you guys are never going to accuse me of being unfair, because I try to be, even when I'm aware that I may have biases, as everybody does. But even when I have my biases, I still try to be, when I'm sitting in a particular position, in a particular seat, I still try to be as fair as I possibly can. So without hesitation, I was able to quickly look at that particular debate and send the chamber multiple examples of where that simply isn't true. That's not true at all, right? So the accusation that I'm favoring my partners and advertisers and I'm only pinning their comments or anything that's favorable to them from the general public, and the negative post about, what is it? And while negative posts about their opponents are being highlighted, that isn't true. Your Honor, exhibit number 1. Okay? Miss Brenda making a comment here that was not favorable to the government. Exhibit number 2, Tessa Solomon. Tessa, you were the CINP supporting Raul. That comment was shared on the screen, as you can see. Exhibit number 3, Damien making an incorrect statement, but nonetheless, it was shared on the screen. Talking about the PAC government increasing their salaries, which is not what happened. It was the progressive government that did that before they left office. Damien got it wrong, and it still made it on the screen. Exhibit number 4, right? Accusing Heather Barton by Ashley Smith of getting questions in advance, which is completely false. No one gets the questions in advance. And Mr. Will Panu himself came on this program and laid out, we asked that question of him, and he explained exactly how it works. No one gets the questions in advance. It doesn't take a brain surgeon, however, to anticipate the vast majority of questions that will be coming your way and to prepare adequately. That's what all candidates should be doing. Exhibit number 5, Mirstar said, "Speak, Raul, speak," agreeing with something that Raul said. Raul is not a paying customer on this platform. He's never been on this platform. So you guys have a lot of energy for pure nonsense. Get your facts straight, okay? And just do better. Okay. So I wanted to make that very, very clear. So as a result of that, what we have now done is in the evenings, of course, as the chamber forum continues, you can have debates between each other. And I saw last night was very, very active. However, we will no longer be putting those comments on the screen. If you guys can't behave yourselves and act like, sensible people, then there will be consequences for that. And so now for the remainder of the chamber debate, that will be one of the consequences. That's it. There will be no further debate or discussion on it. I have made my decision. Mary Star, good morning. She says they're trying to tarnish your business, Sandy. Ignore them. Rubbish. Yes. Well, when you have evidence, you can't tarnish hardcore numbers and evidence. And you guys could see for yourself the screenshots that we have there. And that's how it works. Morning, Carrie joining us from Cayman Brack. I always say to people, listen, you are entitled to your opinion, but what you're not entitled to, folks, is your own facts. And that is why we need experts. We need data. So those of you who keep going on saying, oh, we have too much data already, we don't need any more information. I'm flabbergasted when I hear Caymanians saying that, because we are making decisions in lieu of any real, data-driven decisions. We call it the triple D in this program, but we are making decisions that simply do not make any sense and are not based on facts and figures. So the question then becomes, why? This is why we are going to be doomed to fail if we do not get it together. It's amazing how most, I'll put it in quotes these days when I'm thinking about the United States of America, of course, first world countries have the ability to collate and collect data so quickly. They have the experts, whether it's, people like the CMO, epidemiologists, economists, all of these people, they have those people there who can interpret the data, and it's constantly being collected. Every single month, they can tell you what the job figures are for the month before, whether there was an uptick or downtick in the unemployment numbers, and all sorts of other critical figures that then help the legislators to make a lot of the decisions that they need to make and how to spend your money. And here we are constantly in this country, again, supposed to be a first world country, ignoring scientific information, ignoring data. And folks, we will do so at our own peril. So I want to remind you guys, there will be no phone calls. I'll take this one because Miss Marla, I see her in the studio, but she's not on yet. There'll be no phone calls while she's on the program. Caller, quick question or comment?
Comment, Sandy.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good, thanks. How are you?
I just want you to know quickly, I have the maximum respect for you.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to you, listen.
Mm-hmm.
Please listen.
Mm-hmm.
Do not make anybody take your show and say things that's going to throw you off course. What you're doing is what we want to hear. You're doing a good job. So don't get discouraged and let them sabotage your show and say this, so you're going to get off. You keep doing what you're doing. We are listening to you. We believe in you. We respect you. So listen, the last thing I'm going to say to you is this.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for a bad mind, some people would not have any mind at all. Have a good morning.
Thank you so much, my darling. I appreciate that very, very much. And to the caller's point, I mean, he's absolutely correct. At the end of the day, we're all human. And, I put on my armor. You guys notice I'm dressed up a little bit for Miss Marla today because she is a very, very special guest. And so, yes, thank you, sir, for those encouraging words. And we have to put on not just, a physical armor, so to speak, but today we're going to be arming ourselves with information. Because listen, this is the importance. You guys hear me talk about, my own life experiences. Denny trying to scoot in before I say no more phone calls. Good morning, Denny.
Absolutely. Because when Marla speaks, I listen.
That's right. And we all need to listen this morning.
With facts. She's a very sensible, logical, intelligent woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the Cayman Islands should pay attention.
Thank you.
I appreciate her coming on to this program.
Thank you so
and sharing
much.
her knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, Denny, thank you so much. So, we have to arm ourselves, folks, with different types of protective armor at times. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's psychological and mental. And then, of course, information. I keep telling my Caymanian people, the one thing that nobody can take from you in this world is what you have in your head. That's why it is important for our people to focus on education. We have got to educate ourselves, right? I know from my own personal experience where I'm coming from, that had I not had the benefit of being removed from the environment that I was in and given the educational foundation that I have, and it's not even, it is the desire to learn. The most important skill I have is the desire for information, for accurate information, because having the bachelor's degree, the master's degree, the law degree, all these other things that I have, that's fine. That's a piece of paper. but it's the skill set that it has taught me. Go out there, get information, listen to information from reliable, credible sources. Not every source is reliable or credible. And so the benefits that has bestowed upon me, I want every single Caymanian to have those exact same benefits. Nobody can come to you and present an argument that's illogical and flawed and without facts to back it up, and you're going to accept it just because they say so. No, you have to learn how to question and learn, as Caymanians would say in colloquial terms, how to pick sense from nonsense. So in the spirit of armor, someone sent me this message yesterday afternoon, and I wanted to just read this as a word of encouragement for all of us here this morning as we enter this conversation. Well over 500 people now in the live stream. They said, "Good day, Sandy. I just want you to know that you're chosen by God. Chosen ones will never be popular within a particular sphere because they will tell the truth and expose what needs to be exposed. Believe it or not, you're the deliverer of the Cayman Islands at this time." This scripture quote I'll leave with you today, Proverbs 24:11. "Deliver those who are drawn toward death and hold back those stumbling to the slaughter." Keep reaching out and touching someone. God got you. You are his chosen one. And I thank you so much. That person has way more faith in me than I'm going to take on, but I appreciate the general sentiments of that message very, very much. And what can I say except let's get into the conversation. All right. Miss Melita says, "Welcome to the Mall Road, Miss Marla. We have been waiting for her for quite a time, and now she's here. We're going to take advantage of this." Mary Star says, "There's no greater gift than a good education." And we are going to be educated here this morning with facts and figures. Now, given the controversial nature of today's discussion, of course, we can expect to have some trolls in the comment section. And what I will say to the trolls is you will not be tolerated today. You're free to have your opinions and you're free to certainly make those comments. We will not be taking those on board. We have the report from Ms. Marla, and we're going to be going through some of her report here this morning. And we are going to focus on her position paper that she's put together for us that relates to the actual cruise tourism in Cayman. So I see Mr. Rolson has jumped in. Mr. Rolson, you did not get the memo that we have a special guest in the studio today, economist Ms. Marla. So we're going to ask you to acquiesce to her, and she's going to take as much time as she needs. And we're going to catch up with you a little bit later on because we have a special interview actually planned, or candidate feature planned with Rolson Anglin, who is the West Bay North candidate. All right. So, okay, welcome to the show, Ms. Marla Dukharan. She is a renowned Trinidad-born economist and dynamic leader in Caribbean economic justice with over 25 years of experience. Marla, if I might call her that, has established herself as an influential advisor to governments, international bodies, and the private sector across the Caribbean, and I would say across the world, quite frankly. Recently, she delivered a keynote speech address at the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Economic Forum, focusing on global economic trends and their implications for the Cayman Islands. Additionally, Marla has presented her report on cruise tourism in the Cayman Islands at a community rally that was organized earlier this week by CMR Cayman, where she discussed the economic and environmental impact of cruise berthing infrastructure. Her work emphasizes the need for sustainable and equitable socioeconomic progress in the region. And today we are super excited to have her share her insights specific to cruise tourism with us. So put your virtual hands together, folks, for none other than Ms. Marla Dukharan. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Miss Sandra. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me. And I'm so sorry it's taken so long for this to happen, but
that's
okay.
You know what? I know you're a busy woman.
Nothing happens before it's time, right?
That's right. We believe
I'm grateful to be here this morning, and thank you for all of the positive comments your audience has already made. And also I was very happy to hear what you said just now about the data and making sure that whatever decisions we make, we get all of the information and data as we could possibly get to make sure we make the best decision possible.
Yes.
I support that 100%.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I know that you have done amazing work on so many different topics. And so before we get into the specific data related to cruise tourism, I want to ask you generally, because there's sort of some general questions that we should ask you. And the first one is, were you paid by CPR to attend their rally this week and present the information that you did?
Yes, ma'am. I do get paid most of the time.
Yes, you're a business professional.
To deliver presentations, as I did for the chamber. When was that? In January. However, what I will say is that when they ask me to give this presentation, usually they say, most people ask me to give a presentation. I say, okay, is it half an hour, 45 minutes? And I, put my slides together and so on. In this case, it was a little bit different. I took a step back before I made a decision because I know that this is a very, very sensitive and highly politicized topic in Cayman, more so than any other country in the Caribbean, as far as I can see. And so I said to them, like I say to anybody, you're asking me to make a presentation, but you don't know how I feel about this topic because I haven't done enough work on the data to see exactly what, cruise tourism means for Cayman. I just hadn't done enough work yet. And when I do that work and I come to my conclusions based on the data, that's what I'm going to present. I'm not going to present what, I think is the message that you would like me necessarily to deliver. And they said, no, we get that completely. We want your independence and your impartiality. So I went off and I did so much work. My team and I scrubbed data from everywhere we could find. And we basically, like you would any research paper, wrote this paper. And so they did not pay me to write this paper. They paid me to deliver my findings at their event on Tuesday. And I did not feel like I was equipped to make that presentation on Tuesday without doing the deep work. Okay. And so that deep work, that paper that you're looking at, that you highlighted a little bit, a little while ago, is the deep work that I did to inform this presentation that I made on Tuesday. So they paid me for the presentation. They didn't pay me for this paper. This paper is based on hours. I mean, we did about a month work on this paper.
Wow.
It's 25 pages. I know most people won't read it in its entirety. But I felt like it was important. You cannot look at cruise tourism in isolation. You have to look at the fiscal side, which I did. You have to look at things like the socioeconomic impact, which I did as much as I could in the paper. You have, for example, I went into the Auditor General's reports to look at the things that she's commented on and the kinds of concerns that she had that might have an impact on any big project. Because from what I understand, a project like this, if there is going to be a project to build a cruise berthing infrastructure in Cayman, it will likely be the biggest, most expensive infrastructure project that the country has ever seen. And so I had to make sure that I covered as many bases as possible.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for clarifying that, because, there are always people who want to put a certain spin on things. And
I appreciate that.
Yes. If that information isn't, addressed up front, they will come back with all sorts of things. So your time, you're a professional and you're paid for your time, which is well
Absolutely.
Yes. So we do have your presentation slides there. And I wonder, as we move through the discussion this morning, if we could just utilize those because, like you said, the report is 25 pages.
It is.
I want to encourage people, of course, to read Ms. Marla's report. If you have access to the internet, we've got the link. We're happy to share that with you. One thing with you, Ms. Marla, is once you prepared this information, you make it widely available to everyone. You don't hide it.
Absolutely. I try my best to make it widely available because, I guess it goes back to the reason why I do what I do. I do what I do to make a positive difference. And and part of that making a positive difference is bringing people along with you, educating them, helping them to understand the data that you've put together. So this is why I make it as widely available as possible. One of the things I love doing is, lots of times you have multilateral agencies and so on publishing amazing work on the Caribbean, which nobody reads. Maybe people like me and you will read, but almost nobody else will read. And so I try to interview them, for example, you would see it on my YouTube channel. I interview people from the IDB, the IMF, and so on, to discuss the findings of their report, to help to bring it to more people, because most people wouldn't go to the IMF's website and download a working paper and read it, So I am very much about openness and transparency and sharing the data and educating people and bringing them along, as I like to say, with us.
Yes, and I love that, because that is one of our very, very important remits here as well. So let's go ahead and dive in to the data. Selvin already has a question, and this is maybe a good one that we can address, straight out of the gate, so to speak. He's asking about your data and the presentation, that it depended, he says, on the last 4 years, thus post-pandemic. His conclusion is that if the case that the numbers will affect the outcome as presented in her lecture, she indicated there's a trend, to my mind, post-pandemic in tourism cannot be seen as a trend that reflects the overall industry after the industry was closed. How do you respond to that? Because that is a very interesting question.
Yeah, you know what? The trend that I tried to capture was pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So most of the slides you would notice, this one, for example, that you have up, it starts in 2015. And from 2015, we know that we saw some increases in cruise arrivals across the Caribbean, but also in Cayman. Everything fell off, of course, in 2020. But a lot has changed in the industry now. I think what that that audience member is trying to get at is perhaps the same trend that we saw before COVID might be the trend you would see after COVID. And I think actually, I mean, I can't be sure, but from what I see in the data, it looks like maybe that trend has changed just a little bit. And here's why I try to look behind those numbers that are obvious to you to see what might be able to explain that. So one of the trends, for example, is the shorter cruise trips have been becoming more popular, the 2 to 4 day. Why might that be? Maybe people have less spending to allocate to vacationing. Maybe people have less time because they're catching up with, how many years their income might have suffered, And so the shorter trips seem to be more popular. The Europe, and it's in the report, but not in the slides. There is also a trend where many European destinations have been staging protests and have been pushing back on the amount of cruise ship passengers flooding their cities and their towns. And so less and less European destinations are entertaining cruises. And so my point is, yes, there is a pre-COVID and a post-COVID trend. I am not sure that I would say the pre-COVID trend is the same as the post-COVID trend.
Right.
It looks like there are some differences. And I did try in the data to show both pre and post-COVID. Now, a lot of the data that I used was based on the BREA report. This is the Florida, Central America, Caribbean. It's online. I cited it and hyperlinked it in my report. And they did a report that compares 2018 to 2024. They did 2 reports, sorry. And so one is pre-COVID, one is post-COVID.
Yes.
And I think that, well, first of all, this is the 2 largest data sets available. Okay? So this is the data I have to work with, right?
Right.
And they were able to show the trends that they identified in 2018, how they differed with the trends that they identified in 2024, and the difference between the 2 as well. And I went into a lot of detail in the actual report explaining the differences that they're seeing and the trends that they're seeing. Now, in the slides, however, which is what you're seeing here, remember I had 30 minutes to make this presentation on Tuesday night. I went well over time. I abused my privilege as keynote speaker. So in these 30 minutes, I think it's 35 slides, I did not get into the level of detail that I did in the report. So I encourage people to go to the report when you have time on the weekend.
Yes.
To go in, because there's a lot more in there than you might see in the slide.
Okay. And we have both available. And like I said, please, folks, reach out if you want to read the report and have access to the report. And so this is why it's so important, Ms. Marla, to have you on here to explain how you came to your conclusions and what data you used. Because, Selvin is here, hopefully with an open mind today, trying to educate himself, but he's already made sort of a faulty conclusion because he didn't quite understand, he's in his mind, he's like, oh, you focused on post-COVID data, and you've clarified that, no, you did a combination of both. Having said that, is there anything, I was thinking about this as you were responding to this question, and can we not accept that the world has changed probably permanently post-COVID? It will never be the same again?
Yep. I think so. I think you're right. Because, when you look at 9/11, for example, and what happened and the way that the world changed there, it's because of 9/11 we have to take shoes off, right? When we're going through security. It's because of 9/11 that we have so much AML, CFT, anti-money laundering, focus on legislating and combating the financing of terrorism. The world changed, even though our lives weren't really affected by 9/11 the way it was affected by COVID. The world changed from 9/11. And the world absolutely changed based on COVID. This was a 1 in 100 year event, COVID, right? So to think that things will revert to the way they were before COVID, like if nothing happened, is a fairly naive way of thinking, I would suggest. And so, yes, I do think that things have changed fundamentally. But forget all of that. I think that when I'm looking at this topic, I looked at it in a very holistic, regional, even global, the whole global cruise tourism trends, regional cruise tourism trends, and then I looked at Cayman. Cayman is also a very different place than it was before COVID. I think a lot of people all over the Caribbean recognize, first of all, how much COVID exposed our vulnerabilities. Things like food security, things like fuel security. And one of the things that struck me when I was doing this research, for example, is the fact that you have a port where all of the cruise business is done during the day and all of the cargo business is done at night. And I spoke about this on Tuesday night. I was blown away to learn this. I was blown away to learn that you have one crane that has broken down and another one that's hanging on by a thread for dear life to offload cargo. This is, if that crane goes down, your food security is in serious risk unless you can afford to jump on a plane and go to Miami. And the thing is, so you have to take into account the broad context, but you also have to take into account local context. And I feel like when I was delving into the data on this, the local nuances, I tried to be very cautious to make sure that I take those into consideration. And I think we need to be very concerned about the local nuances and trends. And for example, that port and your landfill, for example, are local nuances you have to be very concerned about in arriving at whatever conclusion you're arriving at.
Right. Yes. Thank you for explaining that, because again, such an important, some people may see it as a nuance point, but it's extremely important to understand the implications of that, because, as Caymanians, we always want to say, we want to adopt what works best for us. But we can't do that in isolation because, of course, we also don't live. We're no longer the island that time forgot. So we don't live in isolation either. So there's a 360 picture that we have to get closer to really taking a good look at. On occasion, we've talked about the port and the aging equipment. A lot of it was purchased used, and it continues to have issues. It's not being properly maintained. There hasn't been funding to replace it. We've even seen people get injured on the port. There've been containers that have gone overboard. And so the port is one particular issue that falls under the Ministry of Transport and ports that we have discussed numerous times on this show, because there have been so many failings, I will say, as it relates to port security, the equipment. There's a whole report that you guys remember, at least in excess of a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago, that I shared with our listeners, where there was an audit, an internal audit that was done that brought up a lot of these concerns that have been going on for quite a long time. So it only takes one little minor incident to throw a bit of a wrench into the whole dynamic of even how our port operates and the safety of our port before we realize the predicament that we're in. Take, for example, this morning, I know that Renee is working on a story. I don't know if it's up on the website yet. There's a fire near Heathrow Airport that has shut down the airport. So now international travel is in an upheaval, because Heathrow is a major airport with thousands of flights coming in and out daily. And those of you leaving from Cayman today, you may not be able to leave on that BA flight this evening because the airport has been shut down. So please keep an eye on the website. If it hasn't gone live already, it's going to be going live here shortly. So there's a lot of moving parts to, these types of decisions and operations, and even as it relates to the location of the port, which is something that we don't have any exact indication of where that might be. Did you look at, Marla, in your discussion as we get into it this morning, did you look primarily at the port going at the current location, or did you take into consideration it being placed elsewhere as well?
I am not a port expert, right?
Yes.
I looked at some reports that were on the port website and online and so on, and I saw that there were different scenarios that were discussed, for the location of a possible cruise port or cargo port. I don't think it's important necessarily for me to get into that. Where should it go? I'm not an expert on that. I was really looking at what are the needs of Cayman. We know that you have had a massive increase in your population over the past 20, 30 years, whereas the port was I saw that there was upgraded sometime maybe early 2000s, 2005 or something like that, if my memory serves me correct. So for me, it's not about the location of the port. There are experts who can comment on that. I'm not one of them.
Yes.
But you do need to have a properly functioning port at the optimal location, wherever that is. I don't know where that is. The experts can decide based on the impact on the environment and so on. But I will say, when I looked at that, I thought that the whole idea of having cruise business done during the day and cargo business done at night, that sounded to me like, okay, this sounds like this port is struggling in terms of its capacity to handle everything that Cayman is throwing at it. And perhaps you need to have a different or a better arrangement. Again, I'm not an expert on port, but it just sounded like it was not optimal to me. It's unusual. From when I looked at other ports in the Caribbean, we certainly have a separation between the two from what I can see in other destinations. Right. So, but again, let's park cruise aside for a second. To have so much resting on the vulnerability of a crane and in this location, it struck me as a bit of a weak point, a serious vulnerability, because if that crane goes down, then what happens? So perhaps we need to separate the two. And I think in the minds of a lot of people in Cayman, the port, the cargo port is somehow connected in their mind to cruise berthing. And I guess that's because of the previous referendum in 2019. And I did discuss that in my report as well, the different wording and how people might have a bit of a mix up in their heads between cruise and cargo. And I just wanted to make sure and separate those two in my report, because I think you really do need to address the cargo port constraints before we even get to the topic of cruise.
Interesting. Because I think on the political front, there has been sort of mixed and confusing messages.
Yes.
You know, we saw that at some point, the minister was talking about the necessity for upgrading the port, which, you know, I think you make a valid point that is definitely required and necessary. But then in some people's minds, that was being attached to cruise berthing, to say if we did one, we have to do the other.
Yeah.
So you don't think that is the case at all?
No, I think it's absolutely not necessarily the case that you have both. There are many countries that have proper cargo port facilities with no cruise facilities, you know, or they have both and they're both separate. Okay, insofar as you can hit two birds with one stone, which you've done in Cayman, why not? Except that it makes you more vulnerable on the cargo side, right? And so you would want to make sure that in the absence of a massive piece of infrastructure that does both separately and efficiently, I guess you would want to make sure that the current infrastructure you have is equipped to ensure that Cayman has its food security and fuel security buttoned down, you know?
Okay, very good. All right, so let's spend some time, if we can, going through the data
report. Yeah,
and the report. Yes. So for the purposes of this show, folks, we're going to rely on her presentation slides.
Okay.
Again, the full report and the QR code there, does that take you to the full report?
Yes, that QR code takes you to this report online on my website. But if it doesn't work, I don't know if it works with the screen, but if you just Google Marla Dukharan Cayman Cruise Report, it should take you. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to try scanning it and see if it actually works. It is a little bit small there, but
yeah. Let me see.
It might still work. Okay, let me try taking a picture of it and see. You kind of have to get close.
Yeah, it's not open.
Yeah, it works. At least
for you. Okay.
Yes. So
this is an old phone.
So you just have to get close because it is, but I'll ask your team, I'm sure they're listening, if we can get a bigger one of that, and I'll put that up on the screen as well for our listeners. Okay, so let's get into it then. This first slide, tell us exactly what it is that we're looking at here in relation to Caribbean stopover tourism numbers.
Yeah, so stopover visitors are the ones that arrive on planes and they spend, well, you call them overnight here in Cayman. So those are the ones that come on planes, not on cruise ships. And you can see that we were having a fairly stable trend, and then boom, we fell off in COVID. But look at where we are now. We're well over where we were before in 2019. And one of the things that I highlight in my report, Ms. Sandra, that's very important for your listeners to understand. I cited a lot of empirical work that was done by the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, and also the IMF. And one of the things that they found in their research is that there is a meaningful, positive relationship between the amount of airlift that any country has and their economic growth, which I found was very interesting. Airlift is the amount of planes and the size of the planes coming to your destination. They did not find a meaningful positive relationship between, for example, the number of hotel rooms or the number of cruise arrivals. It was airlift. Because airlift brings not just visitors, airlift brings people who want to do business in your country, people who want the diaspora who want to come back home and visit family. Airlift has been found to be one of the most important things in terms of driving growth. And excuse me, we had a lot of problems with airlift in the Caribbean. I don't know if you remember, post-COVID, even now. Like I was looking at some flights to get from St. Kitts to Tortola, which are like this close together. And I have to go to Miami or Fort Lauderdale to come. It's So we know we have a lot of airlift problems, but we did see in 2023 a meaningful recovery in airlift, and that improved in 2024. And look at those numbers that we see here in terms of stopover visitors. So, but I wanted to highlight that they found that airlift was one of the most important drivers of growth in the country, in the Caribbean.
Yes.
Oh, there we have the QR
there's the code, folks. Yes. we're always doing multiple things here in the studio.
Yes.
This is, I feel like an octopus some days. It's like a one-woman show, but I've got lots of tentacles and moving parts.
I'm the same. I'm a one-woman show, but I have a team of women behind me. Let me tell you, I couldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a larger image, folks, of the QR code that will give you access to the complete analysis and report entitled Beyond the Debate and Into the Data, Cruise Tourism in Cayman. So please go ahead and scan that. To our Instagram listeners, I see that your feed has just stopped. So I'm going to just restart that here shortly. So not to worry, we are on that for you here as well. Every hour Instagram stops. It's a little technical thing in the background, but we'll get that stream going again. All right, so that is interesting, and I'm glad that you shared that fact from your research, because Cayman has historically had a fairly good amount of flights coming in, not just our national airline, which goes multiple times into Miami International Airport for the day. And of course, we know Miami International Airport is actually one of the busiest airports in the world, but thousands of flights going to all sorts of regional, international destinations, worldwide destinations. But we also have a lot of international carriers, whether it's like American, BA, and other flights that are coming in on a fairly regular basis as well. So folks, scan the QR code, and we're going to continue to go through this. So that's very, very interesting. So our stayover number, we see a strong post-pandemic growth.
Yep. Well, this is the Caribbean. I mean, there's another slide later on with Cayman specifically, but this is the overall Caribbean. Yeah. And can I just run through one or two things that this IMF report, this is in the report I wrote, right?
Right.
They found that tourist arrivals and higher end tourism have been found to have a positive effect on productivity. So there's airlift, and then there's higher end tourism, right? And I highlight this in the report because, of course, the higher end tourists spend more money, and that's what we want. When I was making my presentation on Tuesday night, there was a gentleman in the audience who got up and said one of the reasons that he thinks Cayman has had a decline in cruise arrivals was because it's so expensive here, right? He said people come off the ship and they go for a lunch and it's $100. Whereas if they do the same in Jamaica or in Dominican Republic, it's much less. And the point that it was an important point that he made, but the thing is, what's the kind of tourists that you want? You want the ones who can afford to have lunch here, right? You want the ones who are happy to come on shore and enjoy, for example, Stingray City or a tour to the Crystal Caves, and these tours tend to cost, $100 over $100. So you what you don't want is the ones who come on shore and don't spend any money. And this IMF report spoke specifically to the fact that higher end tourism is found to have a positive effect on productivity. And I recall that the Honorable Deputy Premier in the Parliament debate around this referendum spoke about that, this is a luxury high-end destination that you all have spent a lot of time and money building this brand. And I know the Department of Tourism has done an excellent job of positioning Cayman as a higher-end luxury destination. That is not consistent with mass tourism, mass cruise tourism. And I went into the report to talk about that and talk about the fact that you have this sort of, what's the word I used in the report, this sort of luxury ranking or quality ranking of the cruise lines themselves. And what I found in the research, which was supplemented by the ESO's report on cruise, is that actually, whether by design, based on what I just mentioned, that it's very expensive to come on shore in Cayman,
Right.
or whether by accident, it seems as though more and more Cayman has been attracting the cruise lines and the cruise ships that have a higher, more luxurious nature. And that's a good thing. It happened in the post-COVID era. And actually, I think that's wonderful. You've had more Disneys, and let me find it let me see here. I'm just scrolling through.
Yes. Is that actually in your report as well?
Yes, it is. So
Okay.
the mass market, so this is page 17 of my report. The mass market ones were Carnival, MSC, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean. Whereas premium was Celebrity, Cunard, Disney, Holland America. And it went all the way down to ultra luxury being Ritz-Carlton, and so on. One of the ones, yes, Virgin is there as premium as well. And when I did the analysis of who's arriving to Cayman, and then supplemented with this ESO chart that I put up, it looks as though, even though between 2019 and 2023, you've lost 30% of your cruise arrivals here in Cayman, you've actually seen a shift towards more of Celebrity, Disney, and Norwegian. Cruise passenger arrivals on Disney have increased from 6% to almost 12% of your total cruise arrivals, which is fantastic. We love Disney passengers, right? Celebrity went from 6.8% to 16%. So this is great news for Cayman and your cruise tourism industry, because you know what? You want to get these people who have more spending power, and you want to capture more share of wallet from them. Because one of the things that I also did a chart on, which is on, let me tell you which page, which I was I was heartbroken to see this. If you look at page 14, estimated earnings of Cayman tour operators per adult, and you will see that the tour that chart, yes, that one on the right-hand side, there we go. Because the cruise lines, when they sell your tours to their passengers, they take a big chunk of that fee. They take on average 60%. It means that the economic contribution to the tour operators here from cruise passengers is $47. These tour operators here are being ripped off by the cruise lines, who are giving them maybe 40% on average of what they are getting from the cruise passenger for the tours. Whereas a passenger who came and did their own booking for the tour, or a hotel vacationer who does their own tour, like when I go to Stingray City and so on, these people are paying $125 for Crystal Cave tours, $79 for Stingray City, etc. That's the kind of return or revenue that the tour operators deserve, and they can get from most of their other customers. Why do they need to take only $47 from the cruise? And I feel like it broke my heart, because I just thought, no, this is so unfair. I feel like the Department of Tourism or somebody in the authorities needs to help the tour operators negotiate better with these cruise lines to get a better compensation for these tours.
Let me ask you a question in relation to this. Did you do any research on comparing Cayman's earnings versus any other jurisdiction?
Absolutely, yes. On that same page, if you look to the left of the page,
Okay. Yeah.
That's one of the charts that compares Cayman across the region.
Is it this one here? Total direct expenditure, average hours spent? No, that's not the one.
Yes, that's one.
That's
but
one.
I'll
Okay.
tell you another one.
Okay.
Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you. It's in
Okay.
here.
And
Okay.
are we getting the conclusion? I guess the question I want to ask, are
Yes.
we getting a fair share compared to some other countries, or are there countries that are doing much better than Cayman?
You know what? Cayman is doing pretty well. There are one or two countries that is doing better, but Cayman is doing pretty well. And I'll tell you where I have that chart. Right. If you look at page 8, I think it might be in the deck as well. You know, I think it is in the slides that
And this slide, yes.
But if you look at page 8, okay, if you're looking in the slides, keep rolling. I'll tell you which one. Okay, let's stop there for a second.
Sorry.
This is showing you that on a global scale, our cruise tourism industry in the Caribbean is actually losing market share. But that's not what we were looking for. So, but I just wanted to make that point. But let's go on. Okay, stop there.
Yes. Okay.
You see that disembarkation rate? This is how many, the proportion of the cruise passengers that get off the ship, right? Cayman, if you look, Cayman is at 84%. Look at, you're much higher than many other Caribbean destinations.
Right.
Okay, so you're not doing too badly at disembarking. As a matter of fact, the only Caribbean countries that have higher disembarkation than you are Belize, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Puerto Rico, Grenada, and Guadeloupe. The rest are lower than you.
Or at the same 84%.
Or lower. There's for example, you have Bahamas at 81. Wow. 81% disembarkation in Bahamas is important to look at because Bahamas has massive cruise infrastructure. They have a whole, Disney has a whole island and lookout point, lighthouse point, sorry. There is Cayman, Bahamas, I think, has probably the biggest and most sophisticated cruise infrastructure in the Caribbean. And they have a disembarkation rate of 81%. You have 84%. That crazy. Tells you something.
Yes.
You're already doing better.
Let's process that for a minute, right?
Yes.
Because what that means is people are taking tours, they're on a cruise, right? And they don't get off the ship to see the destination?
Well, okay, 81% getting off in Bahamas, 84% in Cayman. So there is maybe, 15, 20% not getting off. Maybe they don't feel well. Maybe the sun too hot.
There could be any number of reasons why. Yes, it is peculiar because I always thought it would be so much higher than that. I figured it'd be probably in the 90-something percentile. But that is interesting because one of the arguments that people who are pro-port use is that nobody wants to get off of these ships and get on the little what are the little dinkies called?
They're not little. The tenders, they're not little dinkies, they're proper boats.
Yes, but that's they will say, they don't want to get off and get on those tenders because the wave action and they don't like it and whatever. But yet we're doing better than some jurisdictions such as Bahamas who have this massive cruise berthing facility.
Yes, actually.
So their conclusions seem to be not based on data.
No, it's not. Let me read. Oh gosh, I know we're toggling between the report and the deck.
We're used to, like I said, bring it on. We're used to,
let me just read for you. So what I did was I did an analysis just on what you're talking about, Ms. Sandra, comparing. Okay, Cayman does not have cruise berthing. Neither does Belize, and y'all are the two destinations I found that didn't have cruise berthing but have cruises coming. The rest of them have cruise berthing. And I wanted to compare, let's see how they're doing, those that don't and those that do, to give us a sense of whether the ones that don't really are suffering, right? And then it would make the case that if you did have cruise berthing, then you wouldn't have the problem. But here's what I found. And I'm just going to read. So I looked at data of 22 Caribbean countries, 20 of which have cruise pairs, and 2 that do not, like I mentioned, Cayman and Belize.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 22 that I analyzed, 68% of them lost cruise passenger arrivals. 68. So, and this is up to 2023 data that I had. That for all of them, not all of them had published their 2024 data yet. Okay, so I'm working with up to 23. So if 68% are showing declines, then this is beyond a port issue or existence or non-existence. And of the 20 that have ports, so we exclude in Cayman and Belize here, of the 20 destinations that have cruise berthing, 65% of them had a decline in their arrivals in 2023, right? Versus 2019. So the point is that having that cruise berthing infrastructure isn't going to guarantee that you had higher arrivals. Okay, so the fact that Cayman saw 30% lower arrivals is not unique to Cayman and is not unique to countries that don't have cruise berthing infrastructure. 65% of destinations that have cruise berthing infrastructure also saw similar declines.
Interesting.
Now,
very interesting.
Now,
Yes.
let me go further.
Yes.
There are 13 ports in that study that can accommodate, hold on, right. 9 of the 13 ports that have the 65% that I just mentioned, having declines in their arrivals, 9 of those 13, or 69% of those 13, can accommodate the mega ships, and they're still experiencing declines. So I narrowed the data down even more. Let's look at those who, because there's an argument that if you can accommodate the big ships, then we will see increased passengers. Actually, 69% of the ports in this study that can accommodate the big ships, they still saw declines. So the point, it demonstrates in the data that having a cruise berthing infrastructure and being able to accommodate mega ships does not necessarily mean that you would not have been experiencing declines in your arrivals, because many countries, 13 other countries have cruise berthing infrastructure and can accommodate big ships, mega ships, and they're still seeing declines. So having this infrastructure doesn't necessarily insulate you from having declines. Now, and I went further and I looked at countries that have the capacity to accommodate big ships, like Bahamas, St. Martin, Jamaica. They're still experiencing some declines. And guess what? When you look at, if you look at St. Martin and Jamaica and what's the other one, Bahamas, that I had in the report, and look at their economic performance, you know what? Cayman has economic performance that is far better. And I always say Cayman is the best run country in the Caribbean. But when you look at the economic performance of Cayman, it is solid. So irrespective of you having these cruise declines, we're not seeing the economy collapse. St. Martin has been struggling economically. Bahamas is the most cruise dependent country in the Caribbean. 80% of their tourists come on boats. 80%. Huge overweight on cruise. Their economy is struggling.
Wow.
Right? And so there is nothing in the data that I could find that tells me, listen, if you make a bet on this and this is the direction you go, it's going to work out in your favor. All of these European towns and cities that have been overrun by cruise tourism, they have been protesting and turning away cruise ships. There have been mayors who have said to the cruise ships, I don't want you. I want 1 ship a day, no more. Or I want 2 ships a week, no more. This is what we can accommodate. People talk about carrying capacity here. And I know that there was a study that was done, I didn't cite it in this report, and part of the reason why is I could not come to terms with their methodology in understanding how they come up with carrying capacity. I think that carrying capacity is probably something that's far too theoretical and something that has to be more human. Because I hear people talk about when you all had the most cruise tourists ever in 2019, that downtown in Georgetown was so congested. These are the kinds of data points that need to be collected, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the necessity for more data, there are some gaps in your opinion.
Absolutely, there are gaps. You need to find out from people in the shops, the restaurants, as well as people who work in Georgetown. What's it like for you? What is the experience? The other thing you need to ask people is, of course, nobody wants to know that there are businesses and livelihoods that are suffering and being affected by the declining cruise tourism numbers, right? But the ESO did a report on cruise tourism, and they said that there will be job losses and there will be declines in cruise tourism numbers if we don't build the ports. I don't see the methodology, how they came up with that, but one of the important gaps in their report was they did not survey the businesses and the people who are in this industry to ask them, okay, we've seen a 30% decline in our cruise tourism arrivals. How has that affected you? How many layoffs have you had in your company? How much decline in your revenue? These are important statistics because if people have been laid off, if people, are suffering, we need to know. When I look at the earnings in terms of the wages, right, in Cayman, and I try to compare the wages in Cayman with the wages in the cruise industry, right? The average cruise sector employee in Cayman earns $1,871 US a month. That is not a living wage.
Absolutely not.
It is not a living wage. And when I look at the lowest, the ESO data, the lowest wage bracket in their data is 0 to 2,400 Cayman dollars. So it means that you're saying that you want to create more jobs in the lowest wage bracket at a wage of $1,871, which is not a living wage. I think that what we really need to be thinking about is how do we educate and upskill and reskill our people to attract the higher wages? Because when I look at that monthly basic earnings of Caymanian data from ESO, Caymanians occupy the middle. You're in a sandwich. You have expats occupying the highest wage rates and the lowest. Caymanians are mostly occupying the middle, which is not a bad thing. However, you should be heading in this direction, right? Not this direction. If you have to import the labor at this level, fine. But I feel like for Caymanian people, you would want to see your people occupying the mid to high, not the mid to low. Okay?
Yes.
And that
there should be some shift in the trend.
higher. Exactly.
And the
We
fact
should be
that there
aiming higher.
is what should be concerning us. Yes.
We should be aiming higher, not lower.
Yes. The other thing that as I'm thinking and reflecting on your comments about cruise tourism and the salary, right? And even the overall economy and how the economy is struggling in some countries that rely heavily on cruise tourism and who maybe even have these cruise berthing facilities available. I think what one conclusion that in my mind that I'm coming to, and I want you to tell me if I'm correct in this, is that as a sector, we always talk about Cayman has a twin pillar economy. That actually does not appear to be true. What I'm hearing is we have an economy that is 70% or 60% financial services. And that is what is sustaining Cayman. So when the cruise people talk about, all these loss of a couple thousand jobs if we don't bring in cruise berthing in these mega ships, Nobody wants to lose their jobs, but what keeps Cayman's economy going, and we saw this even during COVID when the entire cruise industry was shut down, is financial services.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? It's good that you have both, because that's the whole point of diversifying an economy, or just like an investment portfolio, right? You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. And so it's good that you have tourism. And I make this point in my report. Do you know that every single country on this planet has a tourism sector? It is the one sector that every country has. So it's not a question of should we have tourism, should we not?
Yes.
You have it. You have a beautiful country. People want to come. I want to come. Right? Even the smallest country like the Vatican, or the most isolated country like North Korea, has a tourism sector. So you have a vibrant tourism sector. That's fantastic. So that when one might be up, the other one, and you balance the ship like this because you have some diversification. That's great. So how about we look at making sure that the tourism sector that we do have in Cayman, we make sure that it delivers the results we want in our country. Now, Ms. Sandra, I'm going to repeat myself, and people are going to say, gosh, she's boring. She say the same thing over and over. But you need to have a vision for your country, right? What is it you want? What do you want Cayman to look like? Do you want 1 million people? Do you want to look like Manhattan, or do you want to retain a little bit of your authenticity, right? I don't know what the answer is. Only you guys can say. And whatever that is, whatever that vision is that you have for your country, you need to then organize yourself, your industries, tourism being one of them, financial services being the other, to ensure that you get those results. Now, you have already identified yourself as a high-end luxury tourism market. Therefore, that trend that I talked about earlier, that is more luxury based in terms of the cruise arrivals that you've had, whether by design or by accident, is an amazing blessing. And I think you should double down on that and capitalize on that.
Yes. And I mean, can we do both? Can we have a jurisdiction that appeals to the high-end tourists and also people who are looking for a cheap trip? They just want to spend $1,200 and come here for a weekend, or just come for the day on the cruises and spend $25 with two people sharing a burger. I mean, does that work?
Well, I don't know how it would work, because if you want to come here, you have to, like the gentleman who got up and spoke on Tuesday night, you have to have the spending power to afford the cost of a lunch here, the cost of, if you're coming for an overnight stay. I'm sure you're able to find maybe on Airbnb something that's in an affordable range, as opposed to spending $1,000 at one of the 7 Mile Beach hotels per night. But we're talking about cruise specifically here. And the important point I want to make in response to that question is, the unfortunate thing is, and it's detailed in my report, and there's lots and lots of analysis from all over the world and from the Caribbean that speaks to this, that there is a crowding out and substitution effect between stopover tourists and cruise tourists, meaning that the more cruise tourists you have competing for space on the boats that go to Stingray City, competing for space on the beaches, on the lounge chairs, competing for space at the restaurants, the more cruise tourists you have competing for space, and already they outnumber the stopovers, right? The less stopovers you will have, because the numbers in the cruise already exceed the stopovers and they're crowding out, and you will get those stopovers coming less and less, and therefore spending less. They're the ones that spend the most as opposed to the cruise, right? And there was a study that there were a few that I cited in my report, and it's important to remember that it's a trade-off. we can't have both. So think of a glass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this glass can only hold so much. My glass is right now half empty. This glass can only hold so much. Who do you want to fill that glass with? Do you want to fill that glass with Kool-Aid, or do you want to fill that glass with Swanky? I want to fill it with Swanky. I wish I had some Swanky in it. You
Yes.
want to fill it with quality,
Yes.
right? And the ones that will spend more money and not have to share a burger, as you rightly put it. I think that was a brilliant analogy. I think you would want to fill it with the more quality people.
Very interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Thank you so much. We do have a question here about the data, and I think this is an important question.
Yes.
Cortez Lopez is asking. So he says, past data does not reflect future data.
Yes.
Future data can change by improving, for instance, more cruise tourism attractions, more incentives to increase numbers, etc., and that we can basically improve upon our tourism product. So using past data to reflect future outcome does not reflect the guaranteed results. So we're not talking about guaranteed results. No numbers person, hardly ever, will talk in terms of guaranteed results. But explain why, as an economist and someone who is, your entire business is around data, and you look at data, you look at trends. What do you say to Cortez, who says, oh, well, past data probably doesn't matter because we can do so many things to impact future data?
Yeah, that's a valid point. We can only look at the trends in the past to determine what relationships exist between, for example, the amount of arrivals and the amount of revenue, the amount of arrivals based on the existence of a cruise port or not, which we've all discussed. We can only look at the historical data to help us to understand those relationships so that we can make informed decisions about the future. Here's what I would say again, at the risk of repeating myself and sounding boring. You really need to have a vision for Cayman, right? And you need to determine what is the optimal amount of people who can fill this glass, right? And if Cayman can handle, I just thrown out a figure here. If you can handle 5,000 people in your country at one point in time. That's just a random number. I didn't find it anywhere. Let's just say 5,000 people on shore based on the amount of attractions you have, based on the amount of transport you have, based on the amount of traffic and buses. Let's say you can handle 5,000 people on any given day in Cayman. Wouldn't you want to fill this glass? So my point is that yes, historical data does not necessarily tell us what will happen in the future, but what you can do is be deliberate about your future and be deliberate about who you attract and who you entice to bring on shore, and how do you get a bigger share of their wallet. The flight is already taking a certain share of their wallet. Just to get here, the flight or the cruise ship has already taken a big chunk. And actually, there was a chart in here that I thought was very important, and it's something that I highlighted on. It's on page 9, but it's in the deck as well, comparing what the profits that the cruise ships make versus the profits that the country makes. So you want to be deliberate about how you fill this glass. If you can only handle a certain amount of people, who do you want to bring, and how do you extract a bigger share of wallet? The question made a very important point about the number of attractions and the having things for people to do on shore. That is very important. And I love to see all of the different attractions you have. And I haven't gone to Crystal Caves yet. Only last year I reached Stingray City, I've been coming to Cayman for 10 years, 12
Oh
years.
my gosh.
Only last year because I brought my family here on a holiday.
Yes. They're working you too hard when you come. That's what's going on.
It's true. It's only last year I reached Stingray City. I was heartbroken to go to, I took up stand-up paddle board and went and stand-up paddled all the way to Starfish Point.
Okay.
It You see the amount of boats in Starfish Point, and all these people coming off these boats and holding the starfish like this under the water. And I'm like, why are they doing these things? Why are they picking up these starfish? And I'm guessing these were all, because there were so many of them, they were cruise passengers. And they said, that they said, because I said, why are you all doing this? They said, they told us that we could pick them up once we don't take them on the water. I said, but why do you have to pick it up? Leave it there. Take a picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point
Yeah.
is, you want to make sure that you bring quality people here. The Department of Tourism has spent a lot of money and did an amazing branding exercise. I don't know if you all remember this, and Cayman Kind branding exercise to attract the higher end, more quality tourists here. Do you then want to dilute that effort? I don't think so. You spent a lot of time and effort and money doing that.
Millions of dollars DOT has
Exactly.
allocated to their advertising budget. And we have the whole, I don't know if you remember this campaign, I forget what it's called now, but it was something like Discover Cayman or whatever, but it was a dreamy marketing campaign. And they had a couple of different scenes that they did. I had the opportunity, DOT actually invited me to attend one of the shoots in Cayman Brac. And my apologies, Little Cayman. And they brought in people, big guns from New York, film producers, marketing experts. And it was so interesting to see the behind the scenes production of what it takes to get that one shot. And we're talking about a lot of money, a lot of expertise in the branding, picking branding companies out of New York that supposedly are telling us how to brand our product. And it was all geared towards the high end consumption of our tourism product. And our
exactly.
So it's like on the one hand, we do certain things that say we want that market share. And then on the other hand, we're contradicting ourselves perhaps with, pushing cruise tourism down people's throats. So we do have
it make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it make sense.
We do have some interesting, we're going to go through some more of the slides here, folks.
Find that slide. I don't know which slide number it is, but it's on page 9 of the report. The one, keep going, I'll tell you which one.
Okay.
I think it's very important to see this slide. This one.
Sorry. There we go.
That one.
Okay.
So we found data on CCL, Carnival Cruise Line. It was the only one we could find online. And we looked, because I looked at this thing across the Caribbean and found, why is it that we have so many more cruise passengers than stopovers when we know that airlift is the one thing that has positive implications for growth, and the air arrivals, the stopover tourists are the ones that spend more. How come is it that our region, and Cayman is one of them, that has multiple times cruise versus stopovers, right? I think the ratio in Cayman is about 2 to 1, 2 point something to 1. Anyway, so I went and I looked at this data and found that you have a gross profit margin of Carnival Cruise Lines of $640 per passenger. And then I compare that to the total direct expenditure of the passengers coming on shore to your destination. They are making $640 in gross profit per passenger. Cayman is making $157. 4 times. They're making 4 times more than you, right? So tell me something. Aren't they heavily incentivized to lobby with the policymakers to get a cruise berthing built? Aren't they heavily incentivized, these lines? Look at that. And as we discussed earlier, Cayman is making $157 per passenger for everything they spend here. The tour operator is only making $47. Who is really benefiting from cruise lines here? And from cruise berthing infrastructure? Wow. Who is really benefiting? Look at where Bahamas is on this chart. Bahamas is $167, so only $10 more than Cayman. Yet Bahamas has spent the most and has created the most sophisticated cruise passenger infrastructure in the Caribbean. They have, like I mentioned, whole islands just dedicated to cruise passengers, massive cruise berths, big long piers, very sophisticated attractions.
Mm-hmm.
They're only getting $10 more per passenger.
Wow.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the cruise line is making 4 times more than this
Wow.
destination.
Oh my gosh. I must tell you, I'm sitting here wondering myself now, why are we even in the cruise business? Because it's so imbalanced. It's shocking.
Yeah, and the reason why you're in this cruise business is what that chart is telling you. The reason why so many countries are in this business is on that chart. Because you have big business, these cruise lines, it's big business that are heavily incentivized to lobby. Now, I don't have court clothes, so I'm not going to say how
Who
they
they're lobbying or how they're getting it done.
exactly. But they
Yes.
clearly have a lot of money to incentivize the lobby and lobby.
Mm-hmm. To that point, someone said that we should be looking to the cruise lines. This is Monte Cristo. Please read data from cruise lines, which is not based on bias. I'm shocked that anybody would say that because they
The cruise lines are not biased. Really, they're the ones
no.
making $600 and something per passenger.
That's crazy. That is and need I remind you, Monte Cristo, that all you have to do is look at the cruise lines, their response during COVID, how they were basically a petri dish infecting Europe, the Caribbean. They helped to spread COVID.
They were a vector. They were
more than
definitely
anything
a vector.
else. And the decisions that they made, they were literally hiding bodies on board, pretending like there was nothing going on, hiding their heads in the ground. This is well documented. Like the ostrich, they had their heads in the ground, pretending like nothing was happening and continuing to circulate and go all over the globe until governments said, no, enough is enough. Remember the one, Marla, you may not know this, but this is just an interesting bit of Cayman history. We had a ship that was in the early days turned away from Jamaica. We did a whole story on it. We had a ship that was turned away from Jamaica. They must have put that cruise ship in full throttle and came straight to Cayman because they arrived here within hours that evening trying to disembark. We did a story here in Cayman Mall Road about it. The government's position was like, no, it's fine. We knew there were sick people on board. That's why Jamaica turned them away. Now, Jamaica couldn't say definitively if it was a COVID infection, but they were not going to take any chances. This was the early days of the pandemic. And they said, nope. They came straight to Cayman that night. And our government, led by the progressives at the time, the Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin, was actually in the Minister of Tourism, who was Mr. Moses Kirkernel, had given the port approval to allow them to disembark. It was because of the CMR article, which started to go viral immediately, and the uproar of people saying, no, let's not do this. Their initial position, I remember Alden McLaughlin saying, oh, that's hearsay, that's fear mongering. Sandy's involved in fear mongering, don't pay her any mind. But because the outcry was so, exaggerated, quite rightfully so, that they had to back down and change their minds and deny that ship the right to disembark passengers, because that night they came in and they were ready to do it. Which is shocking. And that's our local example of that. But they were doing that and far worse all over the world. Unbelievable. But
now, one of the things I want to say, though, because I don't want anybody to feel like we're saying, or I'm saying, based on this research, that you shouldn't have a cruise industry. That is absolutely not what we're saying. Right. We're saying quality over quantity. And already somehow, whether by design or by accident, you somehow have a trend towards more quality ships and passengers. And I would want to suggest to you that you maintain that. One of the examples I want to highlight is on Friday, a week ago, I moderated a panel at a conference, and we had a gentleman there from Disney Cruise Lines. And he was talking about how, they build Disney built cruise berthing and attraction infrastructure in Bahamas, and how they were careful to use local culture, local artists, local crafts, and create an experience at this Disney Lighthouse Lookout, I think it's called, that is consistent and authentic with local culture, but it also had the standard of Disney. And to me, that's the kind of thing you want. You want when people come, they come to be immersed in your culture. They want to appreciate your culture. They don't want to just come and share burger, right? And you want people who are respectful of Cayman and its culture and its people. And I suspect that, Disney has been able to curate that kind of passenger because Disney is, and I'm not here to put a plug for Disney, okay?
Yeah.
But Disney is a brand that is global. It's not just a cruise brand. Because if they mess things up, if they come to Bahamas and they create something that destroys the environment and marginalizes the local people and doesn't involve local people, then they're going to affect their brand. Nobody's going to want to go to Disney World. Nobody's going to want to watch Disney movies. It's going to affect a broader brand. And so they have much more skin in the game. And I think you would want to align yourself with brands that are like this, meaning they're going to do much more for your destination and help to capture much more of your culture, pay the local tour operators better. $47 is ridiculous. How could you want cruise lines that are only giving the tour operators $47 on average? No, man, that is not fair. You want cruise lines and businesses that are respectful of you, your culture, your cost of doing business here. I don't care that it's cheaper in Dominican Republic. That's them. That's a whole different country. It's different in Cayman, and you have to respect that.
All right. So this next slide here talks about the Caribbean share of global cruise ship deployment has actually been declining since 2015, which had a peak of 38%. Now it's down to 33%. That's 2023 numbers to be clear. So one of the comments I see a few people making repeatedly is, the reason why certain countries have lower disembarkment numbers is because of crime and because Cayman has been touted as a very safe jurisdiction. We're not having that issue. Did you look at why the numbers were declining and why people are not getting off of the ships?
So the data, the surveys that they do of these cruise passengers does not ask those questions. Is there a reason why? So that's another flaw in the data. The Brea studies only survey the people who came off the ship. So they didn't survey the people who stayed on. And maybe they need to do that to ask them, why didn't you come up? Is it that the sun too hot, or is it that there's crime and you're afraid? So that's the first thing. So we don't have the data on exactly why they are or are not coming off, right? But interestingly, one of the questions that they asked in the survey, and I have included this in the report and I've included this on the slide, is that one of the questions they asked is, how likely are you to return for a land-based visit, a land-based vacation, meaning come back on a plane and stay in a hotel or Airbnb? And of all the survey questions that they asked the people who disembark, that question across the Caribbean and in Cayman has consistently gotten the lowest score. They are much more happy in terms of their survey responses. They're much more happy with the experience they got at the tour, the taxi driver, the restaurant, the actual attraction they went to. But somehow they're not coming back. Like, why? That one really blew my mind. But it's not just Cayman. Across the Caribbean, in that Brea study, you're welcome to go and see it. I also highlighted it in my report. That one question, interestingly, how likely are you to come back for a land-based visit, got the lowest score across all the survey questions. consistently. And in both studies, the one they did before COVID and the one they did after. Now, whether that's a crime thing, whether the sun just too hot, I don't know. They didn't say why.
I think that probably, again, I'm thinking, I've actually never done a cruise. I do want to do one just to kind of say, okay, check it off my list. But I kind of feel like cruise people, again, thinking about the demographics of how travelers think, right? When you've been to a destination, even if it was just on a cruise, you're like, oh no, I've been there, done that. I've seen the Cayman Islands, I've seen the Bahamas, I've seen, you're not thinking about, oh, let me go and have a quality experience for a whole week long where I can take my time and I can frolic with the stingrays for a whole day instead of just, an hour or two. So I think it might just be like people are just quickly checking off as a bucket list item, like if you have done it.
To say I've done it, I've been on 2 cruises, and I'll tell you what my experience was in that regard, coming on shore, not coming on shore. And this is something that is also verified in the data, and I've included it in my report. And I'm going to quote here. There's a book that was written, and I pulled out one paragraph from this book, and it's on page 10. Number 2 on the left-hand side. The experience today on board ships is totally different from 25 years ago, when cruises were used more as vehicles for transport from one destination to another. Now, passengers get a flavor of the Caribbean and the destinations on board the ships through food, music, entertainment, shopping, etc. The cruise ship itself has become the destination. More and more. And so when I went on cruise ships when my kids were very little, they had a whole water park in this ship. They didn't want to leave. They're like, I don't care about the pyramids in Cozumel that they were built by the Mayans, mommy. You could go and see that. I want to be here in this water park on this ship. I'm not moving. And so the cruise ship itself has become a destination. So it is enticing people to stay on board as opposed to getting off. Because when you have a 24-hour soft serve ice cream machine, how are you convincing your children in a water park? How are you convincing them how are you convincing them to get off this ship and walk in the Hudson for 2 hours to see a pyramid? They're not interested in that.
Yes. Wow. I put this quote up on the screen, and we do have a question after
You're
this.
brilliant. You're brilliant. I love how you do this. This is the best interview I've ever had, ever.
Oh, thank you so much. I want us to think about exactly what this quote is saying and what Ms. Marla has just said, right? And to my mind, now the bigger mega ships are going to have even more of that.
Absolutely. They have surfing. They have one you could surf.
Gosh.
There's an indoor swimming pool that you could surf on. I can't remember which. I think it might have been Oasis or Allure of the Seas, one of these Royal Caribbean ones. You can actually surf inside of the ship. There's one that has, I think it's Oasis, that has a whole park, like a central park in the middle of the ship. And before my dad passed, unfortunately, he didn't make it. He's like, I want to go on a holiday in this ship with my grandchildren. Because I say, Dad, the last time he was with one of them, but I get very seasick, right? So I got very sick. I said, Daddy, if you go in, you carrying the children on your own, brother man, because I'm not going to vomit every day again on no ship. But yes, because he was like, I want to be able to see this ship that has a whole park in the middle of it.
It's unbelievable.
More and more, the ship is the destination.
Yeah.
So maybe that is part of the explanation as to why people are coming off less and less.
Yeah. Landing pads, docking facilities, they can receive smaller vessels.
Yes.
The amount of food and features on there. I'm just having a quick look at some of the features of these mega ships. It's unbelievable.
It is.
What they have on board. And I think, to your point, some people may not even feel the need to disembark at all because of that. So
especially if you have children, they're not interested in walking in hot sun.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Very fascinating. All right, let's take a question that has come in. And this person has the following to say. They said, good morning, Marla. Why did you use a 2023 versus 2019 data set, which is comprised by 3 years of COVID data? The same analysis of cruise visitor change from 2023 to 2024 paints a completely different picture and clearly shows the following points. So before we get to their conclusions, let's have you respond to the first question that they ask.
Yeah.
Why did you use the 2023 versus 2019 data set?
So, like I said earlier in the interview, I guess they missed that part of it. I was looking at the two BREA studies, right? And they did one that was a 2018, 2019 study. And they did one that was a 2023, 2024 study. And this by far is these two studies are the most comprehensive sets of data you can get on cruise across the Caribbean. Now, if you go country by country, you get things like arrivals, you get data, some of them will give you disembarkation, but they won't give you the survey that we discussed. And they won't give you the spending totals. And so this is why I use these two studies. These two studies were the most robust data sets that is in existence. And remember, I'm trying to look at not just Cayman, because you can draw certain conclusions by looking at one country. It is important when you're analyzing data to do a benchmarking exercise. And that means you look at other similar destinations to see what they're experiencing, because it could be that you are experiencing something that's exceptional, right? Or it could be that you're experiencing something that's part of a wider trend. And the only way to know is to do a benchmarking and to look at different destinations and how theirs is moving. And so you can say, yes, we have a problem here that's exceptional to us, or no, actually, we're part of a wider trend. And how are we doing relative to others? And that's why I use these two data sets. And that's why I draw the conclusions that I've drawn.
Okay. How are you for time? Can we go for another half an hour?
Let's see. It's 9:29. If I can leave, because I have to another meeting. If I could do 10 o'clock, Miss Sandra,
Perfect.
You have me, and I'm enjoying myself, and I'm loving it. So I'll stay with you for another half an hour.
Thank you so much. So let's pick up, I mean, you addressed that first question, which I think is important, but let's pick out just two of the points that they make here. And then I'd like for you to comment on those. So the first thing they say is that 16 out of 24 Caribbean destinations, 67%, increased cruise visitors. And they're saying if we look at just the same analysis of cruise visitors change from 2023 to 2024. And
they're seeing in 1 year there's an increase. Yeah, I'm not arguing with I won't argue with their data. Okay, they're comparing 2 years. I was comparing
a much wider
data set.
Yes.
But if you're saying that other destinations are seeing higher arrivals than, and Cayman is seeing decline, let's unpack that. All right. Now, remember, I spoke to the fact that you have more and more higher end cruise lines and higher end ships coming to Cayman compared to what you had before COVID. That could be part of the explanation. That, the big cruise lines are, like the gentleman who got up on Tuesday and said, part of the reason why they're not coming is because it's too expensive and they don't want to come on shore and spend $100 on lunch. That could be part of it. So maybe the higher end ones are happy to come because they have the $100 to spend on lunch. But remember, I mentioned to you that I noticed in the data that the 2 to 4 day cruise trip is the one where they're experiencing the most growth. And Cayman is outside the 2 to 4 day trip. So maybe that's another reason why you're seeing declines and others are seeing increases. So you can't just look at but the point I'm making is you can't just look at that 1 year, 23, 24, and say others are seeing increases where they're seeing declines. Therefore, it has to be because of the lack of cruise berthing infrastructure.
That's faulty.
Actually, no, there are ones with cruise berthing infrastructure that are also seeing declines. There are ones who have the capacity to accommodate big ships, mega ships, and they're also seeing declines. So yes, we are seeing declines and others are seeing increases, but that is not explained by the cruise berthing infrastructure or their capacity to take on the big ships. I think it's probably also explained by, like I said, the cost, people not wanting to disembark because it's too expensive, the 2 to 4 day itinerary, where Cayman is not included in the 2 to 4 day itinerary. You know, so you have other explanations of,
Yes. And this is why, can I just say,
sure.
right, when I was in university, when I was at USF, I took a course in logic. And it was the most difficult. I thought it was going to be so easy because we all think we're logical. And it was one of the most difficult courses because let me tell you something, Miss Marla, I'm not a numbers person. I run from numbers. I am that's why I went to law school. That's why I speak for a living. Like I am writing and on the other side, right? I have to really think. I have to really use my brain properly when it comes to numbers and figures. And when I got to algebra, I was like, oh, please, no more math for me. You know, I was running.
You're like my daughter.
I was running from it in university, but I still took some courses that kind of made me think about, so logic works in so many different ways, right? And we make conclusions based on flawed information and flawed data, and we cannot do that. So to your point, and even CADA looks like collections says that you can't just look at 1 year for answers. And
exactly.
Important. You need data that takes you over a broader period of time to see trends. A 1 year period of time is not a trend, really.
No, it's
that
not.
simply is not sufficient. And it also doesn't allow you to make sufficient conclusions, which is basically what this person has done with their questions. They've made some conclusions that anybody
for 1 year,
would say, no, that's faulty logic, and it just doesn't work. So let's continue going through a few slides, because again, there's some more important points here that we want to pull out of your presentation. So this one here is a big one that always comes up, right? What are people spending when they come here? So this slide is entitled "Cruise Passengers Spend More Than Average in Cayman Despite the Absence of Cruise Berthing." So tell us what this is all about.
So you can see on the scatter plot of this chart, on the vertical axis, it's the number of passengers, right? And so we roughly have a maximum of, let's say, somewhere around 2,000 coming. This is on any given day, right? And then on the horizontal axis, you have $50 going all the way to $210, right? So you would see in Panama, for example, they're experiencing maybe, what is that looking like? Maybe 400 passengers a day, spending $190. Guess what? I wish you all were Panama. You know what I mean? Look at that number. They're spending nearly 200 US and the number of passengers are small. Versus, look on the other extreme, right? You have countries where they're spending less than $70. My country being one of them, Trinidad and Tobago. Cayman is somewhere in the middle, where you're looking at maybe, say, $115, $120 on average, which is in excess of most of the countries to the left of Cayman in terms of their cruise passenger expenditure per passenger. And you're experiencing, maybe it looks like 1,000 a day or so on average. Now, of course, you're averaging a whole year here. Whereas if you go higher up, look at Bahamas. Bahamas is experiencing roughly the same passenger spend per day. If it's a vertical line from Cayman to Bahamas, so roughly the same amount of spend. But look at how many Bahamas is getting. They're getting close to 4,000, 3,000. Yeah, close to 4,000 a day. Cozumel not far behind. So because again, they have whole islands just for the cruise passengers that don't impact their local people. So this is telling you that Cayman already is getting a higher amount of cruise passenger spending than most of the other destinations in the Caribbean.
And can I ask you about the Bahamas, like when the cruise lines have that entire island experience, right? Do they, like everything that's done on there, they are, that's their money that they're keeping? Like they purchase the island?
No. So here's the thing. The cruise lines, so Disney is an example, they have their castaway key for a long time. They spend the money. and build the cruise infrastructure in the case of the Bahamas. And Disney also builds ports or contributes to the cost of the ports in other countries. I think it depends on, and maybe you need to have a look at this, and I promised myself to do it and I didn't. There is an agreement that Disney made with the government of the Bahamas. Heads of agreement that outlines what Disney's responsibilities are to the Bahamas to have this island or this part of another. They have a whole island and then they have part of another island. And what is the agreement and the contract that they had with Bahamas? But I know that Disney pumps a lot of money into the destination to have that destination of a certain standard and quality, because of people coming on Disney's ship have a certain expectation of quality, right? Like everything else associated with their brand, it's about quality. So they spend money to get that destination up to a certain standard. Now, your question is how much of that money stays on shore? And I'm so glad you asked that question, Ms. Chandra, because I lamented in my report and I lamented in that presentation last Tuesday, there is no country in the Caribbean, Cayman Islands included, Bahamas included, that has measured the net fiscal, meaning government revenue, or net foreign exchange impact of tourism, much less cruise tourism. And I think, here's what I think. I don't have the data because they're not collecting the data. I think that because we import 90%, 90% of what we consume in the Caribbean, including the fuel, right, that creates electricity, including the food that they eat, much of that money that the cruise passengers or even tourists that come on shore via planes, a lot of that flows back out, right? So how much of it is staying on shore? I don't know. When you have ownership of assets like cruise ships and hotels that are foreign owned, their profits are going back to wherever they're domiciled. In the case of Cayman, maybe they're tax domiciled here, I don't know. But my point is nobody's measured that net foreign exchange impact and how much of it actually stays on shore. Why do you think they never measured that?
Wow.
Maybe because it's not in the interest of the tourism sector and the tourism ministry to measure it, because the numbers probably not going to look so
They're
good.
not going to be favorable.
Maybe.
Yes.
One can only imagine based on the fact that they haven't measured it.
Yes.
We can only be suspicious, but they need to measure it to tell us. And so to answer your question of how much of this revenue stays onshore, we don't know, but we can only guess that it's not a lot based on the fact that a lot of the assets are owned by foreigners and the amount of the import, the heavy import component of what the cruise and the tourists in general consume.
Wow. And for our A students in the classroom, if you're interested in reading more about this agreement 2019, I do have a link here that I'm going to put in the comment section. Feel free
to. Oh, good. I wanted to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is in relation to the Lighthouse purchase agreement here. So Disney completes Lighthouse Point purchase and signed heads of agreement with the Bahamian government back in March of 2019. So some of the things that they were supposed to deliver on, of course, you want to fact check that now that we're in 2025, but basically they were going to get 190 acres of property, including the southernmost point to the from the government of the Bahamas,
of
a national park. So they were going to do some environmental things. They were going to donate property. The donated property was appraised at $6.29 million. Disney was going to ensure a minimum of 120 Bahamians would be employed during the construction of the project, and the construction would maintain a minimum of 80% Bahamian workforce. They claim that they were going to create 150 permanent sustainable jobs with health benefits once the project was completed. And they were going to partner with a number of training and professional development agencies, including the Maritime Academy, the LIM Maritime Academy, and others to ensure the Hospitality Institute of the University of the Bahamas to ensure that they could have placement of Bahamian workers in the facility there, and also Bahamian vendors on the property for the sale of authentic, high quality Bahamian retail goods, services, souvenirs, arts and crafts, and so on. So this is a very interesting piece. Like I said, I'll post it in the comment section. You guys are free to read it at your leisure, but I want you to fact check what actually happened. But keep in mind that everything in relation to this was subject to the environmental impact assessment and environmental management plan being reviewed and approved. So the environment, again, playing a key and critical role.
Not just that, I mentioned earlier, and I want to emphasize that you want a brand that aligns with your values of your brand for your country, right? You do not want a brand that comes here that does not align with your values. And you're a country that is very mindful of sustainability, okay? And you would want a brand that supports that. Miss Sandra, I recognize we're coming close to the end, and I just wanted to.
Shall we fast forward to another slide?
Because I want to just, I have my final paragraph in my report that I want to read, so that we can probably discuss them and wrap up with that. So in my conclusion,
this is page 24.
This is page 23.
23, okay.
On the left-hand side. So post-pandemic, cruise arrivals to Cayman have been declining, but a similar trend is observed in 83% of jurisdictions in the BREA 2024 study and 68% of the CMS data that I was able to get, including those with cruise berthing infrastructure and those that accommodate mega ships and those outside the 2 to 4 day cruise trip, which includes Cayman. This demonstrates that declining cruise arrivals is not at all unique to Cayman, and that cruise berthing infrastructure and the capacity to accommodate megaships will not necessarily reverse these declines. I think it's important to emphasize that. I think the decline in Cayman's cruise dominance versus stopover is arguably a positive trend, meaning you used to have something like a 5-to-1 cruise versus stopover. Now it's something like 2.5 to 1 or something like that. It's in the report. The analysis conducted does not suggest that Cayman's cruise sector, which still dominates the tourism industry in Cayman, more so than the Caribbean average, is in jeopardy. And again, we don't have data on the businesses and the loss of income and loss of jobs in the cruise sector in Cayman. The authorities need to do a better job of capturing that data insofar as people are being affected, right? In fact, on the contrary, Cayman's dominant cruise sector already has, listen, and I want to go slowly here, you already have a higher than average per passenger spend. You already have a higher than average disembarkation rate. You already have a higher than average onshore tour purchase rate. In Cayman, you already have a higher than average earning per passenger for onshore excursions. And you already have a trend towards smaller and more high-end cruise lines versus the mass market, right? With the emphasis of quality over quantity. And so in the absence of data demonstrating that this lower cruise arrivals has caused some undesirable socioeconomic consequences in Cayman, and I do not have that data, and ESO did not capture anything like that in their report, I would therefore argue that development of cruise berthing infrastructure in Cayman is unnecessary at this time. And that's one
Your
conclusion that I want to make sure that people see. And that's why benchmarking is important, Ms. Sandra, because if you're already doing better than the average in the Caribbean, and you're already doing better than most other destinations, then how much better you think you're going to get? Even if you build this cruise berthing, you think you're going to get that much more money? You already get more money per passenger. You think they're going to disembark more? Well, they're already disembarking more here. So how much more are you going to squeeze out of this stone, out of this glass, as I keep saying, how much more you think you're going to be able to squeeze? I really don't know, that I'm convinced you can squeeze a whole lot more. You would want to gravitate more towards continue to gravitate more towards the luxury so that this glass is filled with quality people who not come in to share a burger, that's what you want to do. The other thing we didn't touch on, Ms. Sandra, that I think is very important to discuss before I go is I looked at the government's fiscal performance. Now, it is not necessarily the case that the government will, if there is cruise berthing infrastructure, that the government will finance it. We don't know. We don't have any information on how much it's going to cost, where they're going to build it, how long it's going to take, who's going to pay for it. We don't have any of that information, right? But I thought, let me look at the government's fiscal numbers, just in case this ever were to happen. How would it impact the government's finances? And remember, government's finances is not government's finances, it's your finances. People lose sight of that in every country.
Yes.
Government finances is yours, because if the government cannot pay its bills, guess what they're going to do? They're going to raise the money from
Tax
you.
the people, yes, in some way.
Exactly. When you have debt to be repaid, how do you think that gets repaid? The government don't print money out of the sky, although some countries do. Cayman can't, because you have a currency board arrangement here, thank God. But somebody's going to pay for it, and it's your children and grandchildren are going to pay for the debt. So you have to look at it. And when I looked at it, I am not very pleased with what I'm seeing on the fiscal side, right? The government has doubled its obligations, its debt obligations in a couple of years post COVID. And I'm thinking that it's just a matter of time before there is some implication for your credit rating, and your ability, and you have this fiscal framework for fiscal responsibility. Framework for fiscal responsibility, FFR. And you have to make sure that you honor this FFR. And I'm not pleased with the trends I'm seeing on the fiscal side. And based on everything I saw, including a report from the the Auditor General that says government policymakers are making decisions on projects without adequate financial data. How are you making a decision to go ahead with a project without all the numbers? I know you don't like numbers, Ms. Sandra, but these policymakers get paid.
I don't like to
look
have
at
to
the
do
numbers.
But I believe in numbers to support decisions.
Yes,
That's
of
why on this
course.
program we have a major thinking, triple D, data-driven decisions.
I love that.
I leave it to you. You're the expert.
Love it.
I love it. One final question, and then we're going to do our vote of thanks here today. So, Ms. Marla, what you may not know about me is I have my finger on everything, the pulse of so many different things. And I've got people who send me information in real time. So there is a ProPort WhatsApp group, and they're always chattering about, what's going on. So one of their members posted something, and thanks to the individual who shared it, and they had the following to say. Cayman mask. I know it's a little bit small, but I'll read it. It says, Marla fails to connect one very important point, and that is that there are 35 mega class ships were ordered in 2024. In 4 to 7 years, most of these old or smaller ships will be scrap metal, and mainly mega ships sailing around the Caribbean. Also, 40 businesses in Georgetown have closed since the 45% decline. Holistic picture must be shared. Now, I know that, of course, you have addressed this, and it's in your
chart.
slides.
I'm looking for this slide.
I saw it somewhere.
It's called New Cruise Ship Passenger Capacity. Right, that's it there. Before we go to that, the amount of businesses that closed down in Georgetown, there is a difference between correlation and causation, Ms. Sandra, as it relates to numbers. There was a study that once found that cancer causes smoking. Cancer causes smoking.
Yes.
No, it doesn't. Because two things correlate doesn't mean that one causes the other. As a matter of fact, the causation is reversed in that case. A restaurant closing down. How do we know for sure that it wasn't just because of COVID? How do we know that their service was bad and their food wasn't good and people didn't go and they didn't, so they closed down? So you have to be very careful when you say all these business. And again, the ESO did a study on cruise tourism, and they did not measure these things. They should have gone to these businesses and said, I'm doing a survey. Tell me why your business is closed down.
Right.
And if it is that all of these businesses close because of less cruise passengers, well, then we know we have a problem. But they didn't capture the data. They need to find out who are the businesses and the people suffering as a result of this. They didn't.
Yes.
So I've dealt with that. Now let's look at the data on
Yes.
cruise ship passenger capacity. As a matter of fact, the majority of cruise ships being built are the 2,000 to 5,000 passenger capacity, as you can see in this chart, or the below 2,000. Only 11% are the mega ships over 5,500.
And this is what period, what year? Is this 2024?
Yes, this is 2024 data of the sources and they gave me the online source of ship builds. And most ships being built are in the under 2,000 or the 2,000 to 5,000 capacity. As a matter of fact, our friend from Disney who was on the panel last Friday, he said Disney is gravitating towards smaller ships because, again, quality over quantity. You want people to have a good experience. You know, these big ships are sometimes, you could imagine being on one vessel with 5,000 people. That's more than the island of Montserrat. Montserrat have 5,000 people. Imagine a ship carrying more than the whole population.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So how do we juxtapose that then towards, with the CEOs of these companies, Carnival and so forth, who are saying, no, we're focusing on building bigger mega ships. So you guys need to get ready.
Well, then that goes back to my question of what you want to fill this glass with, Ms. Sandra. You want to fill this glass with Carnival Cruise Lines, passengers who are going to come and share a hamburger. If this glass is all the capacity of what you could drink, I want Swanky inside here. I don't want Kool-Aid. I want quality. I want good stuff. So, so do you have to have a vision for your country. You have to have a vision for your tourism industry. And if you want quality, which is what I'm saying, the whole country has been branded as a quality high-end destination. The Honorable Deputy Premier himself got up in Parliament. I quoted him in my report where he said Cayman has been successful in attracting the high-end quality tourists, and you are to be applauded for that. Then why you want to attract the 5,000, 6,000 ship passenger ship from Carnival?
Which cannot be a quality experience.
And they're on onshore activity. I've been on a Carnival. Their activity is the hairy chest competition. I'm sorry, no. I was appalled. My cousin booked us on this. My cousin booked us on this holiday, and I did not do my homework. And I reached there, and they having hairy chest competition. Like, no, why you want that? You want the Disney people. You want the people who come on the Ritz-Carlton, on the Virgin, who want to come and be part of your luxury island and not going to quarrel that it costs $100 to have lunch here. That's the people you want.
Interesting. All right. One final point. Karen says that ACT, that's the Pro Port Group, is having a meeting on March the 25th at the Southtown Community Center. The second part of what she says is most interesting. Please come out and get more facts and data from people who are actually in the cruise tourism industry, as though they are the data experts. Folks, Ms. Marla does this for a living. Data, for those of you who think that you're experts, you're what we call the Google doctors of the world. You're not the experts. That's why I did everything possible to get her on the show this morning so that we could hear it from someone who has no skin in this game.
No, I don't. I can't even vote. And I'm not going on. And
at the very beginning, how she approached the report. And the information. She hadn't had any conclusions. She hadn't drawn any conclusions. She looked at the data that was available to her. Yes, there's some significant gaps in the data, but what was available to her, her conclusion is what it is. Just because you work in tourism doesn't make you a data expert. It doesn't mean that you're understanding, exactly what is going on. So let me do a big thank you for coming on the program. And of course, we have a little treat here on the show, Marla, that we do, and it's called a kaboom. And numerous people have said this morning that they've enjoyed the program immensely. And they want to give both of us a kaboom, but I think you're the star here today who deserves the kaboom. So here is our kaboom button. Kaboom!
I love it. I love it, Miss Sandra. This has been the most fun interview I've ever done.
Oh my
I
goodness. Thank you
appreciate you having.
so
I'm
much.
sorry. You know what? It took me very long to make the time for you, but I'm glad that I did it today. Nothing do happen before it's time, as we say in Trinidad.
Absolutely.
This is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed this immensely.
Absolutely. We've got a comment here. This person says, completely off topic, but I find it amusing that an island girl, Marla, keeps mentioning the hot sun. I bet she loves the AC like myself.
Listen, menopause is a real thing, right? I'm not able with the hot sun. No, and my children not able with the hot sun either. We're spoiled.
They go on to say, she's so pleasant to my ears and so enjoyable to listen to, but I do love a Trini accent. And then they go on to say, love your colors today too. The suit is so lovely. So Miss Anne says, yes, give her that kaboom button. Great job, ladies. I stayed till the end, but it was very informative. That's Miss Debbie. She's just moved all the way halfway around the world. She's now in Thailand.
Wow.
So thank you, Debbie. We know it's kind of late there. Thank you so much for tuning in. So again, I would like to thank Ms. Marla Dukharan for joining us here today on the Cold Hard Truth to share her expert insights on the proposed cruise berthing infrastructure ahead of the April 2025 referendum. Her data-driven analysis of the economic and environmental implications. I know we didn't touch much on the environmental part, but please read the report. It's available for free online. Has provided our audience today with valuable perspectives to consider as we all prepare to make this critical decision for the Cayman Islands' future. We truly appreciate you, Ms. Marla, taking the time and you're lending us your expertise in addressing such an important topic. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you for having me, Ms. Sandra. And thank you to all the people of Cayman for making me feel so happy and welcome here. I love it here. I can't wait to come back. And we will keep in touch. And you can, anytime you invite me, I will try my best to make time for you.
Because there's so many other important issues. I saw someone else mention, Miss Sandy, I love this show, but can we do it on all of the topics like, can we do like a marijuana one? Can we get you to do some research on that for us? They want, and listen, your time is valuable. So we will find the money for your time to put these reports and do the data. I don't know how much it costs, but maybe we'll get a CMR discount or something. But we need to know ahead of these very, very important issues, gambling and
those are important.
Marijuana. They're important discussions as well for us to be having. So perhaps we'll talk off air about how we can engage your services on those fronts as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Sandra. Thank you to your audience and to the people of Cayman. I love you all a lot and I love this place.
And look at us, folks, Caymanians on time, 10 o'clock. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We did it. We ended on time. Thank you to Miss Marla. Miss Melita says, thanks, Miss Marla. Don't be a stranger. You hear? Michelle says, please rerun this interview closer to the referendum. Absolutely. And it will be available, of course, on all of our social media channels, YouTube, Facebook. Our radio listeners got to listen up until 9:30. Miss Perla says, beautiful ladies, come back soon, Miss Marla. Miss Darlene says, don't go, Miss Marla. People like you are always welcome here. Richard Caymanian in Texas says, great show and great guests with a great host. Perla says, I love Marla and I love that Trini accent. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today and for joining us. The 13 says, great show. And it was absolutely a fantastic show. We appreciate Ms. Marla taking time out of her extremely busy schedule to join us today. And I'm going to, Zoe says she spoke the truth and nothing but the truth. I'm going to give all of you a kaboom because you paid attention. Nobody called after we cut off the call. So that's for all of my students paying good attention and following the rules today, and some good questions. And I had a whole slew of questions. I tell people I don't normally prepare questions because I believe in authentic interviews that just flow. But I did ahead of this prepare questions. And I didn't even look at the sheet. I didn't get to any of these, I don't think, because that's how I am. I just, I don't really write anything down, but I did write something down. I never even got to it. So there you go. So thank you all. Some great numbers today, over 500 the entire show. I know that you guys are paying close attention. This is an important topic, folks. The Department of Tourism and Ports has some ads running they have their position, and you listen to both sides, and you have to come to your own decisions. We are running their ads and stuff as well. We're giving people a fair shot to have their discussion on both sides of the table. But what we didn't want is any sort of a confrontational situation where people are calling in and arguing with Ms. Marla. That is not what this show was about, folks. Ms. Darlene says, I hope her hard ears MPs heard Ms. Marla loud and clear. We need to educate ourselves, and I think this is definitely a fantastic show today. So I enjoyed myself, and I hope all of you did as well. One person here says, good morning, old heart. Thoroughly enjoyed her calm and fact-filled presentation. #vote no. Excellent interview. Very informative. Hats off to CMR. Very captivating. I couldn't move. Yet some people are allergic to data. What a mess. Anonymous Cayman mask is Monique. She changed her name to send the screenshot. Oh, what a hot mess. All right. So we continue on. Why? Oh my goodness. All right. Anywho, we continue on, folks. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I've got to run to a few meetings. It is Friday. Please have yourselves a safe and productive weekend. No drinking and driving. Be safe on our roadways. And I got to go and instruct my lawyers now to sort out a few people. So y'all have a beautiful day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Cold Hard Truth on Bobo 89.1 FM. Cayman's #1 talk show is live weekdays from 7:30 a.m. Never miss an episode again. Watch anytime on CMR's Facebook and YouTube channels for the latest show episodes. Don't forget to follow us online on our social media channels. And visit CaymanMarlRoad.com for all the latest news and community happenings.